Here we go. Just a simple question as we start. What have you ever done? Well, not what have you ever done, but what have you done in life that you just sat back and went, wow, that is so amazing? Now, I have done a lot of things in life. I'm not very creative when it comes to sewing. I'm never going to stand back and say, wow, that's really, really good. In fact, in home ec with Miss Wolf in middle school, high school, I was a good seam ripper. My mother was a very good seamstress. My sister-in-law was a good seamstress. My other sister-in-law was a good seamstress. I would never do something I made and go, wow, that is so good. One of the coolest things about being married to a farmer is they can make cool things. And there are some things that I have suggested highly, mostly for the Hiawatha Festival of Trees. I need a tree topper, and I kind of describe it. And when he gets done with that, I'm going, oh, that is so cool. Of course, it probably involves some welding and stuff like that. But I think if I was to personally look back on the one thing that I probably would say, similar to what God said, oh, that is so good, was the birth of our first child. Now, I'm not taking away from the others, but that first one is just, it's the first, and it's amazing, and it's incredible, and you just go back. I mean, I guess maybe I'm not sure I said, this is very good. I just said, we did this, and now what? So, chapter 5 in our study, the fourth commandment, still is talking about our relationship and our level of priority that we place on who God is and the presence He has in our life. So, observe this Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commands you to keep the Sabbath day. I can tell you right now that in our culture, we don't even discuss the Sabbath except if you are of Jewish heritage. Or if you really want a day off, then you might say, hey, we need a Sabbath. So let's just kind of break it down. The Sabbath, the word Sabbath, actually means to be utterly satisfied. God rested. So the word rest, in terms of looking at the Sabbath, is to be utterly satisfied. Now, if you and I were to define rest, we would probably say, well, it's when you stop working. Or I'd always said it's when you stop forward progress, movement, and you just stay there for a bit or a long bit. But I think an interesting thing is rest is received. Settling. Settling doesn't always mean stopping. Rest is something you receive. It's not necessarily something you do. And of course, if we go back to the very reason of our existence, Jesus is our daily Sabbath rest. He's where we truly are utterly satisfied. When we get to talking about what Sabbath, what rest does, and I'm not talking necessarily about the Friday night to Saturday night Sabbath, although if you were of Jewish nature, that would be what you would understand. We're just talking about, as a concept, what is Sabbath? What is a day of rest, time of rest, do for us in the concept of our daily faith walk or our daily living walk? But when you think about it, how does rest affect the human body? Well, we all know take a toddler who is overstimulated and they are impossible to live with. They need a nap. Yet when we get older, we don't translate that to us. When we're feeling ornery, attitude-wise, the whole thing, we don't, hey, I think we need a break, I think we need a rest, we need to go take a nap. It affects our emotions. Rest affects our emotions. If you want to make a good decision, if you need to make a good decision, we want to make good decisions. If we need to make a good decision, we want our emotions on a balanced, not on a teeter-totter. We want to be balanced. We want to be standing where we're not up and down and up and down and up and down, because our emotions affect how we think and how we speak. So then if we look at it, what does rest do to us spiritually. I want to go back to Psalm 23. Psalm 23, I could memorize it. I put it to the tune of, "O come all ye faithful," for the kids in first grade when I was teaching. It's a psalm that's very quickly memorized and recited, but not the depth that we go into thinking about it. And we're not even going to get past the first 7 words. Well, there's more than 7 words. But in Psalm 23, 1-3, it says, "He maketh me lie down." Okay, now just stop right there. He maketh me lie down. Go back to the toddler. Not very many toddlers are going to walk in their bedroom, climb up in their crib, and go, "I'm ready for a nap." No, we have to make them lie down. God is going to make us lie down because he knows it's not our go-to. Now, if we're exhausted, it might be our go-to. But in the normal focus of life, we just don't. Look at your calendar. Just go back and look at your calendar. I don't know if you do planners. But 7-8 months ago, when we realized I was going to have shoulder replacement surgery, the doctor said, "You take 3 months and you're not doing anything." It was a Sabbath. It was a rest. It was on the calendar. Marat is inaccessible for 3 months in the normal ways that Marat would be accessible, because that was a non-option. So it was on our calendar, and it still is. Obviously, if you listen to this at a different time, it wouldn't apply. We don't just look at our week and say, "Going to take a rest here, going to take time out." So, "He maketh me lie down," in Psalms 23, comes before "He restoreth my soul." So just think about that. He makes me lie down before he restores my soul. And partly that is because a lot of times when we're going and all in an uproar, we can't settle our brains, much less opt to be restored, because we're not restored going 900 miles an hour. We're restored when our heart is quiet, our soul is quiet, our body is quiet, and we listen. So I love the Psalms and how that Psalms 23 talks about that. But I think the Sabbath is to remind us to ask some questions, to stop what we're doing, to stop the busyness of the world around us, and just talk to God about things. One of the questions would be, "Lord, are you really first in my life?" If God says, "I want you to take a Sabbath to show me how important you are to me, or I am to you," if God's asking us to take a Sabbath to really connect with him, are we bucking and getting all upset under the collar and, "Why do I have to take a Sabbath?" That would indicate he's not first place in our life. Other things are more important. And another question would be to ask, is there anything between God and myself that I need to analyze and handle, confess, deal with, repent of? When we slow down, we think a little more clearly, and when it's quiet, we think really, really clearly. And then another question is, do I have troubles that I need to turn over to you? Cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you, is a verse in 1 Peter. But I think what a lot of times we do, if we look at it in a fishing sense, we cast our cares, we throw our line out, and then we reel that back in and say, "Okay, I cast it, but I'm taking it back in." And we keep doing that to Jesus. We don't really cast our cares on him. We cast them at him, and then we pull them back in, and we don't let him have them. What troubles, what things do we need to turn over to God? And then I guess the biggest question is, am I pausing long enough in my daily routine, in my weekly routine, in my life? Am I pausing long enough to reboot, refresh, and renew? Now, if you think about it, Jesus was a man of rest. He took off all the time. He took PTO, personal time off. I don't know, we farm, I don't know what that is. But I take off and I take trips. I go away to the lake. I find times a lot to just be alone. I find times to put myself in places that nothing else, I can't do anything else. And that forces you to. One of the jokes was, years ago, we had a paddle boat on the first lake. Nobody liked the paddle boat except Mom. So if I wanted to be alone All I had to do was take the paddle boat out on the lake because nobody was coming with me and nobody was coming near me. And I don't know, I took a shower, I cleaned up. They didn't want the paddle boat working. They didn't want to paddle it. Then they'd also say it's tippy, and they'd give me all these excuses, but I knew very well if I wanted quiet time, all I had to do was get in the paddle boat and nobody would bother me. Now, we don't naturally rest. And the other little thing we don't do is we don't rest by simply quitting work. It has to be an intentional refocusing and reframing. Goes back to Psalm 23. Makes us lie down, because we're not going to lie down on our own unless we fall, and then we can't get up, and then we'd say, okay, Lord, now I'm lying down, and he's going, that's not what I intended, but I'll deal with it. So historically, Shabbat was from Friday night to Saturday evening, dark to dark. And it also, one of the things he wanted to remind him is who is the master and who is the slave. And he reminds him that you came out of Egypt. You were a slave in Egypt. Normally, slaves never quit working. And he gave a different precedent. Not only are you not going to work, but the slaves, the lowest in the totem pole, they're not going to work either. And then, let's just add another element to it, your cattle and your oxen. And then he puts donkeys. But he also includes strangers. So it's a hospitality thing, and it's a time of renewing for everyone where your shadow falls. Shabbat took preparation because they really didn't do anything on the Sabbath. So they did all their pre-work beforehand, and their house was clean, the table was set, the candles are polished, everything, new clothes were put on. It was a time of spiritually emptying the mind of the worries of the week and to regroup. Basically, you're regrouping, not recouping. That would be sick. The land. Back in that day, the land needed rest too. In our day, in our culture, we rotate crops and we can add things to build up the phosphorus and the mineral content of the soil. And certain crops take certain things out and certain crops put things in. So soybeans add different things to the soil. Corn takes out different things. So by rotating crops, we kind of do let the land rest in a way. But back in the Bible times, they actually, every 7 years, the land rested. And if the dirt, it's so important that dirt rests to build its nutritional value back up. We need to rest too, because actually we are made from dirt. But I think the biggest thing that Sabbath does is it does what God did when he looked back and saw what he had made, and he said it's good. He was looking at the things he had done and saying, this is good. And that's what Sabbath does, is it refocuses our mind and go, these are the good things in life. These are the things that I've been blessed with. And oftentimes when we are in a hurry and going from thing to thing to thing to thing, being busy, we don't stop and reflect on the goodness of God and the goodness of his presence in our life. And it also, Sabbath was a reminder that life is more than work. And our culture tends to place value and worth on our work ethic, what we've accomplished, what we have, what we are. We ask kids when they're younger, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they come up with fireman and policeman and detective and all that. And we don't expect the answers we want, because I think we have put so much value into what you become. That's not what you are. How about if somebody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the kid goes, I want to be a person of integrity. I want to be known for telling the truth. I want my character to be what people see. I want people to see me as kind. That's where our identity and our value is, not our work, not what we do to get a paycheck. Now we need to get paychecks, but that's not what our worth is, where our worth is. And the Sabbath reminds us it's not about work. It's about God created you. He saw you were good. Your life that he has given you is good. I think, though, that the big thing is God wants intimacy with us. He wants us to slow down and let us take a good, long, hard look at what he's doing in our lives. And the bigger thing is God didn't ever ask us to do anything that he didn't already do to begin with. And resting after he had created is something that we can very easily do. So when we have some questions, we talk about Sabbath is a time that you should restore. And in the New Testament, there was some real interesting upset people when the Pharisees, Jesus was talking, and Jesus was going to heal the man, and with a withered hand, I believe, and they were all upset because he healed on the Sabbath. Well, actually, the Sabbath was a day to restore, and Jesus simply restored that man to his value, to his worth. And Jesus was big into restoring people's life back to its original value. So some things to consider. Are the things that we're involved with really good? Can we sit back and take some time, take our Sabbath, and look at the things that we're doing and going, that's really good? Or are we going to sit back on our Sabbath and look around at things and go, oh, that was a mistake. Oops, shouldn't have done that. Because if God sat back on his Sabbath and said, that was really good, and he appreciated what he had done, we should be doing the same. Sabbath should be, whether it's 2 hours, a day, or a Sabbath week. It should be a conscious effort to be aware of God and everything that's happening in our life. It's kind of like an inventory. Take the time, slow down to look and see, what is God doing in my life? And thank God for that, but also see where. Have you ever done a timeline? Take a big long piece of paper. Make it 6 feet. And you start when you were born. And then maybe go up, make it so it would go 100 years. Not that you're dreaming you want to be 100, but it's easy. So halfway would be 50, half of that would be 25. So 25, and then break it down into 10 years, and then break it down into 5 years. And go back, if you can remember. Sorry, some of us have bad memories anyway. What has God done in our lives? It's amazing when you start thinking about what God has done, and you start writing it down. That's what Sabbath's about, is sitting and looking back at what God has done and being appreciative of that. So I think the bigger thing is, Jesus said, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath, and he claimed to be God there. But in the New Testament, 1 Thessalonians 5:23, it kind of brings us true round color, because it said, may God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's kind of like Sabbath is sanctifying us and letting us, our whole spirit and soul and body, get a reboot. Because we want to be blameless. We want our lives to reflect the character of God. We don't do that running with our heads cut off. Now, when I was a kid, it's probably, I don't know if this is appropriate. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. When I was a kid, we butchered chickens. My brother and I were the youngest ones. My aunt came up and my cousins, and it was this wonderful time of butchering chickens. Well, my brother and I's job was to run after and catch the chickens after they got their head chopped off. Because a chicken with its head chopped off still has body-moving muscles, that's a good one, and they just run crazy. So think about that. If we don't take a Sabbath rest, we just kind of are running like with a chicken with its head cut off. So there's two different kinds, quickly. What it is, why do we need it, and how do we do it? So there's two kinds of Sabbaths, the inner disciplines. So there's an internal Sabbath and there's an external Sabbath. If we do not tie into our internal, we will just do the external by checking boxes. So internal. Number one, it's an act of liberation. It's an act of freedom. Slaves didn't work. You're being reminded that you were freed from the slavery back in the Bible times. They were freed. We are freed from sin. We are liberated. We don't have to work for our value. We are saved. We don't have to work for our worth. And the second one is act of trust. God created the flowers. They just bloom and be beautiful. God created the birds. They don't worry about what they're going to eat. We are not God. He is. We are, as much as we try, we are not responsible, but we are responsible. It's not up to us to meet our needs. It's up to God to meet our needs. And you can be busy from morning to night, 7 days a week, and you're trying to meet your needs. And yes, you do need to work a job, but that's not what I'm talking about. God is the one who's going to meet our needs, basically the need of where does our value come from, and will Is God big enough to take care of us? So then there's 4 things for external Sabbaths. Number 1, take more Sabbath time. Probably most of us aren't taking enough Sabbath time. Write it in the calendar. And you maybe start with 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon, a Tuesday afternoon. I'm going to take a Sabbath. Balance. So balance your life. So avocation, don't do something you do. So if you're a golfer, don't go golfing. If you you're a heavy equipment operator, that you're not going to do that time. You're not going to do what your rest of your week does. Spend some time in contemplation. So contemplation, think about the story of who you are. And think about it, not just like, oh, okay, I know who I am and it's gone. No, really think about it. Who you are, where God has brought you. Think about that story of your life. And then be inactive. Rest. Stop. Third one is to be accountable. We all do better when we are accountable. We do all better when we have a group of people that we say, okay, I look at my schedule, make sure I'm not running too many places at one time. Help me take Sabbaths. Help me lie down, because we all need help lying down. Or Psalms, David wouldn't have said that. And then number 4, inject Sabbath into work. Now, when you think about it in the Old Testament, when they gleaned in the book of Ruth, they left parts of the field undone. That was purpose. Incorporate Sabbath into your work. We have all winter for our equipment and the land and stuff to rest. But a lot of times when we were kids, my father always said, if you farm on Sunday, you fix it on Monday, because back then the implement dealers weren't open. But not just the tractors need a rest. Everything just needs to reboot. So if you have a vocation, if you have a job, work in a Sabbath into that. If you're your own boss, that's why people a lot of times take walks over noon hours, just injecting something different into their day. And then number 5 is be a part of a community, because if we're a part of community, we do a lot better about following through with anything. So go back to observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy. No, we're not commanded to do that in the New Testament, especially as Gentiles. But if it was important to God and it's a reflection of His character, it's something we should think about and implement into our life, because it will only make us more aware of who God is. It'll make us more aware of what He's doing in our life. And if God thought it was important enough to do for Him, certainly there's a place of value in our lives. Thanks.